Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Timothy Lee, and I'm a mining analyst at Red Cloud Securities. And today's webinar features Kootenay Silver. Kootenay is a junior exploration company focused on the discovery and development of silver deposits in Mexico. Kootenay has successfully discovered 3 deposits with resources totaling 214 million ounces of silver equivalent. In the measured and indicated categories, plus another 54.9 million ounces of silver equivalent in inferred resources. The company is one of the largest junior-owned silver resource bases in Mexico. The company is currently focused on its flagship Columba project, where a 20,000-meter drill program is underway and a maiden resource is expected in due course. Today, I have with me on the webinar Jim McDonald, President and CEO of the company. The format of the webinar will be first, Jim will provide an update on Kootenay, and then we'll take questions live. Please send us your questions via the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time. To start, we'll handle the disclosures and then get into the presentation. For Kootenay Silver, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the company's corporate presentation, and that's located on the company's website, kootenaysilver.com. For Red Cloud Securities Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on our website for company-specific disclosures. So now I'll turn it over to Jim to discuss Kootenay and what investors have to look forward to with the company.
Thanks, Timothy. Okay, so as Timothy said, we're an exploration company focused in Mexico. We've been in Mexico for 20-some years. We've made a number of discoveries, brand new silver discoveries, which resulted in 3 different deposits that we have 43-101 resource calculations on. And we are in the middle of our 4th discovery, which is we estimate the best discovery, maybe by far, that we've made to date. And that's the exciting new discovery of the high-grade Columba vein system. It's actually, we think, a new vein district. And we're pulling a lot of spectacular drill results in terms of not only grade, but width. And we are just finishing up now a 20,000-meter drill program that was started last year in about April. And so all of these things together give us a lot of leverage to the silver price. The existing resources in the ground give us that leverage, and you'll see our price and volume respond quite quickly to the silver price movements. And then we've got, in addition to that, this growth potential through the new high-grade discovery at Columba. And the company was started as a private prospecting venture. We went public in about 2005, and we started to focus on Mexico, and have been down there ever since. A lot of our staff. Our staff in Mexico is all Mexican except for one Argentine. Most of them been working with us for over 10 years. This board and management team slide, the long and short of that is I won't go into a lot of details, but we've got experience right from the grassroots prospecting into resource definition, mine build, and mine operations. I was one of the founders of National Gold when we bought the Mulatos deposit from Placer Dome and Kennecott in the year 2000, right at the bottom of the gold market. Then we brought in John McCluskey and Chester Miller to help us finance that acquisition, and that became the cornerstone for the creation of Alamos Gold, where I stepped off that board quite some time ago, 2012. But it's a big success story for us, and not only that, it was a big eye-opener for Mexico and the big potential down there. So we've been focused in Mexico for that reason, and we've made a number of very successful discoveries in Mexico, silver discoveries. So the capital structure looks like this. Shares outstanding, 62 million. Outstanding current market cap is just right around 62 million shares. And 52-week high and low, you can see there, 154.65 cents, $1.54 in the fall when we're putting out a lot of great results. Plus, the silver price was approaching $34 a share. Average daily volume over the last 90 days around 200,000 shares a day, and that bumps up pretty quickly to 500,000 when the general silver market and that silver price is starting to move. So that cash position was at the end of September, and once we finish this current program, which will be towards the end of February, we'll be just shy of about 4 million there. Key shareholders: Eric Sprott, Condire out of Texas, management directors. You see there, we founded the company a long time ago. And institutions, 32%. A lot of the well-known resource institutions involved there, but also big weighting to high net worth and resource investors in Switzerland. In addition to that, we have something like close to 9,000 retail shareholders. And then we've had former investments from major mining companies in the past, which is a testament to the success of our discoveries. Coeur because of the La Ciguera discovery, Agnico Eagle because of our original Promontorio discovery, and then the La Negra discovery got Pan American very excited and involved. These aren't current shareholders, but we've attracted a lot of attention from majors along the way with these different discoveries. And so now we're in the middle of our fourth discovery, which is the high-grade Columba discovery in northern Mexico and northern Chihuahua state. And as Timothy already touched on, the other existing discoveries that we have resource calculations on total over 214 million M&I ounces, silver equivalent ounces, and almost another 55 million in the inferred category in the three deposits, Promontorio, La Negra, and La Ciguera. We updated the resource estimates in all those projects over the last year and a little bit more, and to just have those projects ready for when we get into a strong silver market, so those projects are ready to advance. And all of these opportunities come via a result of our generative program, sort of grassroots prospecting, searching program that we have going on almost all the time in the background. And so when we find new projects, if we can see one drill program, a clear target where one drill program can result in a discovery, we'll keep that project to drill test. If it's earlier stage than that, it's going to take more work, higher risk. We find partners to come in and option and mitigate the risk. And if they earn their interest, then we'll look at either participating or selling the remaining interest to them and retaining a royalty, like we did on the Cervantes copper gold discovery in Mexico. Now, the projects are all in northern Mexico. You can see this map here. The red line is depicting the famous Sierra Madre trend. Our La Ciguera resource sits in the Parral district of Mexico. And that Sierra Madre trend is where the most of the big silver producing districts are. And La Ciguera sits in one of those called Parral, where nearly 1 billion ounces of silver have been produced. The other resources are sitting in the Promontorio project in Sonora State. That would be Promontorio and La Negra. And then our new discoveries up here at Columba. And that's where our real focus is. And shut that off. And so pretty much all our recent milestones and catalysts and news are centered around the Columba project and drilling and drill results there, the raises that we did to finance that. We have coming forth here in this year, we're just finishing up that 20,000 meter program. At the end of that, we expect it will put us in a position for a maiden resource, which could be at the very end of Q1 and maybe a little bit beyond. And then we've already have over 50,000 meters of stage drilling designed to continue drilling off these different veins and drilling veins that we haven't even drill tested yet. So at the end of this 20,000 meter program, we will not have found the limits of the mineralization on our principal veins even. So things are still going to be wide open. And so that gets us into the Columba project, a little bit of history on it. And what we're looking at here is an outcrop of one of the veins sticking right out of the ground. When we got introduced to this project and took up the option to earn 100%, which we now have, by the way, over a year and a half ago, we made our last payment. We now have 100% of this project. Well, when we started work here, there'd been no exploration in nearly 40 years, nothing at all, and it'd never been drilled, in fact. Yet it had two periods of past production, sort of 1900 to 1910, where one of the veins, they sunk shaft down 200 meter vertical depth. They had 6 levels off of that shaft, and then that was stopped by the Mexican Revolution. In 1958, 1960, a small private company came in, took advantage of that old development, and did a little bit of small scale mining. Now, since we've come in, we've done a lot of mapping surface work, and we've drilled about 48,000 meters in near 200 holes. Most of the drilling has gone into 2 veins so far. The F vein, which is the historically worked one, we've got consistent hits over 700 meters of length. We found parallel veins that don't come to surface there. We've drilled it to 200 meter depth, still open. So there's enough drilling and consistency across there. We know there's a resource sitting there that'll be part of the maiden resource when we get to that. Then the other vein we've done a lot of drilling on now is the D vein, consistent hits and defining a over 1,200 meter strike length. And we have taken that to over 250 meters of vertical depth and still wide open to depth and going strong. So, and then multiple other veins, some of which we've tested and which we haven't. And that D veins become our real focus because of, at the moment, because of the widths and grades that we're getting there. So the setting is in a caldera. Here, this is a volcano. You're looking at an old volcano here. You can kind of see the rim of that volcano. I'll get rid of that, but you can kind of see the rim of the volcano here in this image. The yellow lines are the main structures, depicting the main structures. You see a picture of a shaft and an arrow pointing to that in the middle of the image. That's the bottom of the caldera, that's the lowest point on the property, so to speak, elevation-wise. And that point has just barely exposed the veins where they become productive. This thing is almost entirely preserved from erosion. So when you climb up the hillsides, any direction from that shaft, which is more or less the erosional low point, you start to lose the vein outcrop because you're now above the vein system, literally above it. But when you drill down to that depth of the shaft and deeper, it's still there and preserved. So this thing has suffered almost no erosion, meaning that whatever was deposited here originally is still there. And the other thing is the scale here. From the upper left of those yellow lines to the lower right, that's 4 kilometers. The opposite direction is about 3 kilometers. So it's got scope and size, size of system for something pretty big in terms of resource count. Really well located. You see in the upper right of this image, that's it's basin and range. It's agricultural plains out there. It's a 3.5-hour drive from the property to the international airport in the capital of Chihuahua. And so excellent infrastructure as well. And so when you look at the scale of what we have, on the right-hand side, that's our vein system. In the middle is the much more advanced Panuca discovery by Vizsla, which is over 300 million ounces now. And then on the left-hand side is the operating mine that was discovered in about 8-9 years ago and brought into production very recently here, the Silver's Crest discovery at Las Chispas, a narrow, very high-grade veins in that case. These are all classic vein systems, each one of these, and of similar scale. So just on scale alone, we see that we've got something that has the potential for 100 million ounces or some multiple of that. The Las Chispas on the far left is about 140 million ounce in resource. I think around 80 million in the reserve category currently. So we've got that scope size for that. And so when we zoom in on our project a little bit, I'll point out the gray shaded areas or fractions that we don't own, everything else we do. And of course, we're talking about acquiring those. And the red dots are where we have drilled. The historic area is right smack in the middle there where you see a lot of red dots. That's the historically worked area where we got consistent hits over 700 meters at length. And you'll see some highlights there, 2.6 meters in the left-hand side of the image there, over 800 grams within a wider zone of over 300 grams, 7.5 meters of 650, for example. In the upper right is a more complicated zone, but hits up there. You see in the center upper part of the image, 6 meters at 2,000 grams per ton. Just some excellent intercepts. And pretty well every vein is mineralized here. And where you don't see red dots, we have not even drilled yet. So the strongest vein so far is in the lower center called D vein. And that's where we got highlight hits like 34 meters, half kilo. 90 meters above that, we've got hits like nearly 18 meters at 650 grams per ton. Well, now we've defined mineral along that vein for over 1,200 meters of strike length and gone out to over 250 meters of depth, just wide open to depth there. So when we're just going to look at a long section of the historically worked F vein, this is gram meters. So when you're looking at this, anything that is in the green hue and above is really good grades and widths. And you're seeing some of the plunge in this thing still open to depth. You'll notice the whole 12 on the bottom of the image there, 11 meters of medium grade with real high grade core there of almost 200 meters at depth, leaving it open to depth there. And consistent hits right across the whole thing. There's a resource to be defined here. There's also a parallel vein called the hang-wall vein where we're getting intercepts of over 2 kilos in that vein. And so then when we go to the D vein, here's just the plan map of the D vein trace you can see there. And then to the right, upper right, there is another vein set that we think is going to be pretty important because we're hitting some high grade and good widths up there too, and that's called the B vein or B vein corridor. And that's certainly one of our areas of focus as well. But this D vein now is just incredible. We've drilled it for 1,200 meters, consistent hits right across, and wide open to depth. Some of the best holes are some of the deepest holes. You look right in the middle of the image in the lower middle there, you see hole 153. Well, that's 40 meters of medium grade. That's above cutoff. So in a mining situation, you take that whole thing, and the true width of that is probably about 20 meters. Just incredible. When you look at a lot of the Mexican vein systems, they're mining things that are 1.5, 2 meters wide. And here we have an 11-meter high-grade core within that. And so, and you look to the far right, there's 98 meters over 200 grams. And inside of that was about 38 meters of 358 grams per ton. So true width, again, on that case was about 50%, just incredible widths and wide open. Then you see in the far left, that's where we got one of the real highlight holes. It's nearly 10 meters of 1,700 grams per ton. silver there wide open. And we're now drilling this at roughly 100 to 200 meters spacing across this area, just to find the edges of it, which we haven't even done yet. And one other thing I want to point out, when you're looking at this image, you'll see the hill top there. And so when you're above where that grade line, dotted line is grade line, you're above that, you'll have your structure and you can map it at surface, and you may or may not have vein, and you probably won't have any silver at all. But you have to get down below that line and really below the 1750 meter line there. That's where you start to see your grade. And this illustrates pretty nicely how this thing's preserved from erosion. So you got to get down to that depth and deeper. So as a general guideline, when we're drilling, when we design our drilling program, we'll be shooting for that depth and deeper. And we've taken this thing down to, in this image, about 250 meters of vertical length, and we're still currently drilling. We see that structure going a lot deeper and still wide open at depth. So we're nearly done the 20,000 meter drill program. It'll be completed by around the end of February. And then we will what we're going to do is just continue drilling because we haven't found the limits of the mineral here. And then we also have a lot of other veins to test. And then with the 20,000 meters, we believe we'll be in a position for a maiden resource, put that out, and then continue drilling to expand on that. We'll just touch briefly here on the resource properties, which we've just set up to advance when we get into a stronger silver market. In other words, when we can, we'll be in a position to move these projects ahead, whether it's through JV, sale, or financing. But they're now ready to be advanced at that point. In the meanwhile, we're focusing our energies on drilling off that Columba discovery for obvious reasons. Grade is king, and the size there could be pretty big. So this image here is the La Ciguera resource, and it sits in the famous Pearl district. We're on the extension of a mineral trend that comes out of the Santa Barbara, San Francisco del Oro region, which is in the lower center. Over 500 million ounces of silver have been produced there, been mining for almost 500 years, and they're down to a 2,000 meter depth. Our resource, sitting to the north in the upper part of the image, sits in a 10+ kilometer long structure that you can follow at surface before it disappears in the valley cover, going towards the old district. And it sits right at surface, and most of our drilling is less than 150 vertical meters. So the upside potential here is tremendous. There's almost 52 million ounces in the measured indicated category and 11 more in the inferred. And there's a target internal to the resource pit shell that's around this resource that's got potential to add 10 or 15 million more ounces with a pretty cheap drilling program. So just tremendous exploration potential here. We redid the geologic model that showed that the old resource was diluting the grade. We ended up with a much better grade at 102 grams for an open pit. That's pretty good. And when you're in the mid 30s for silver, it starts to look pretty encouraging. And so the next steps there, when it does happen, would be some drilling to expand slightly on that one target, and then probably move into a PEA on it. The Promontorio La Negra projects, like the original Promontorio discovery, is a big low-grade diatreme system, needs stronger metal prices. We updated the resource here for two reasons: to get all the metal pricing and cutoffs into current pricing, and also we wanted to get a resource out on La Negra discovery, and that's that image there. That's a hill, sticks right out of the ground, and it was subject to an agreement with Pan American. They really liked that project, and they came in and did a JV with us where they were going to carry us all the way to production if La Negra got to 50 million ounces. Now it got to about half that size. but real nice grade for open pit. Metallurgy looks like a simple leach. So we think for a small operator, it could be a nice high margin operation. And so we've got a resource number out on it now, and we will do something with it when the silver market's stronger and we can get better value. So this is bringing us just to the conclusion of the presentation here. We've got this huge resource base in the existing discoveries, and then we're in the middle of this even more exciting Columba discovery, classic high-grade vein system, really good upside potential on that and size potential on that project. We're actively drilling it. There's going to be lots of drill results coming out in the next couple of months. There's about 10 holes in the assay lab right now, and we're still drilling with two rigs with about 2,000 meters more to finish that current program. So Timothy, that brings us for full circle to questions now.
Great. Thank you, Jim, for the very informative presentation. As Jim mentioned, we'll now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. Reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. And we already do have several questions. Maybe I'll start with some that are project specific to Columba. Looking at the metals mix, is there any gold associated with the silver? And also looking at base metals, as silver often occurs with other metals.
Yeah, so the results that we're showing through the presentation are all silver only, but there are some significant lead zinc results, especially particularly in the D vein, and it is anomalous throughout, sort of a 1% combined lead zinc in most areas, and some areas of that D vein much stronger. So there is a lead zinc component there. Gold can kick, but it's not consistent. It's not really a factor in the case of the Columba veins.
Okay. And you had mentioned that there was a pit shell associated with the resource, but given the nature of the veins, do you see this ultimately as open pittable targets that you'd be drilling, or would it also involve an underground mining component?
So in the case of Columba, this is classic veins. It'd be underground scenario. Okay. Could be quite favorable in terms of costing because of the widths of these veins, especially in that D vein. I mean, the resource, the optimized pit shells I was referring to are on the other deposits, La Negra, Promontorio, and La Cigarra.
Okay. Okay, great. And I guess we did have one question looking at what is the total amount of silver. You had mentioned the resource, but what would your projects need to start production?
What do they need in terms of like a number of ounces? Well, that can be a long answer, but the long and short of it's dependent on two things. The quality of the ounces, or the margin of the potential operating margin, and the capital cost required for the size you're building. So you need enough ounces to obviously pay for the capital investment and then make a profit on the mining. So in the case of like La Negra and La Cigarra, just on a paper model that we've run before, when you're into mid-30s silver, they start to look pretty interesting. Now, in the case of Columba, a general rule of thumb for narrow veins, or sort of the 2-meter wide veins, is a cutoff is 180 grams. And when you got something that's 5 to 10 meters wide, well, your cutoff could probably drop to around 100 grams, for example. So when we're seeing hits that are in the 300 to kilo range, you know, that's certainly a very high margin potential grade. That's a great grade to have. And so how many ounces you're going to need will it'll be somewhat dependent on the scale of mine you build. But let's say for underground, for example, the Las Chispas mine went into production. It's got a reserve of about 80 million ounces. It's got a resource of around 140, as a guide. Now, what the bigger companies really like to see, and the market really likes to see, is you get into that 100 million ounce range eventually. Your maiden resource it's not likely to be that big, that's for sure. Like in the case of Las Chispas, which is now operating, their first resource was, I think, just shy of 50 million ounces, or about 50 million. And then they had an update, it took it to somewhere around 75, 80, and then over 100 eventually, and then became a mine. So I hope that answers the question. It's not a clear-cut answer.
No, there's certainly a lot of different factors in what could make a mine. And one kind of circling back, associated, we did have a question that came in. Have you conducted any preliminary metallurgical test work on?
No, we're designing a metallurgical program now for this year. We do have some historic records of the previous mining from that F vein, and they were reporting sort of mid 70s up into low 80% recoveries from the scant historic records that we have. So, and visually we're seeing nice silver minerals, silver sulfate salts, and silver like argentite and minerals like that are pretty typical in these Mexican vein systems. So, which is an indication of, okay, you're probably going to have decent metallurgy here. Let's see how good we can get it when we start the testing program.
And we do have a question here on, obviously you have had a business model where you've had these partners or selling projects, including to majors. I guess one question was, why don't you have a strategic partner on the projects that you have currently? There must be significant interest from bigger companies.
Well, like I alluded to, like the case of La Negra and La Siguera, for example, they need a silver price over $30, and we hadn't seen a silver price like that until about 7 months ago, and so that's part of the reason. And also part of the reason we're so excited about Columba, because with those grades, it works at any kind of silver price.
Okay, great. And obviously another factor in what makes a mine, we have a question, what is the infrastructure situation? Do you have infrastructure in the area?
Yeah, it's quite good. If you recall the one aerial image that we showed there in the upper right, you could see the agricultural plain. There's a highway running through the middle of that, paved highway, 30 kilometers in a straight direct line from the property. There's a town of over 50,000 people with all the amenities you need there. And then there's actually power to the base of that small mountain the caldera that we're on. There's actually power right to that point. So infrastructure is really quite good.
Great. And we have a couple of questions more on kind of the silver market a bit and company valuation and so on. And you had mentioned projects would potentially need over $30 an ounce silver. What are you looking for as potentially a strong silver market here? Given that the company would benefit here from the silver market.
Yeah, so we finally saw mid last year the silver price start to break out finally, and start to follow the gold. And gold is near record highs. And because of all the macroeconomic things going on around the world and the amount of money the governments have been spending since the financial crisis, really, and continue to do, those precious metals are going to continue to, in our opinion, increase. And gold has already broke new highs. We expect silver to be doing the same thing, and eventually it follows, and eventually it outperforms gold historically in every other cycle, and that's what we expect to see again.
Okay, great. And one other question. Obviously, everyone always wonders why the company's stock price isn't doing even stronger. Assuming 270 million ounces of silver equivalent and enterprise value of about 55 million Canadian. Kootenay's EV to ounce is about 20 cents. That's cheap. Why so cheap?
Yep, very, very cheap, and we don't have a good answer as to why. You look across the sector, other juniors are suffering the same thing. That eventually will, I think, the value will be realized eventually, and the Columba is a great catalyst to make that happen. We start showing that we're building size, and that we've got great expansion potential with a maiden resource. We're building size, and it's still wide open for expansion, and we're working towards getting that 100 million ounces, and moving on towards some economic studies that will results dependent, of course, and assuming success, will certainly catch up with that value. Now, the existing resources, if we're correct about a silver bull market really kicking off here and going through $40 and towards old highs, we're certainly going to see a lot of value come in then. And remember, the last cycle, in ounce, in situ value being given to companies was upwards of $3 an ounce in the ground, and depending on the project, sort of 150 to three something an ounce. So right now the average is down around 25, 30 cents as observed. So that, a couple things: results from the drilling and silver price.
Okay, great. Yeah, absolutely. And one question always popular, what is the company's current cash position, and are you looking for financing?
Well, we've got big aspirations for a whole bunch more drilling this year. We're going to be drilling at least what we did in this current program of 20,000 meters again. And we have a good cash position. We'll be just under 4 million at the end of this program. So pretty strong position to be in. And we'll be looking for a market opportunity to top that up so we can expand again on the same size of program. But we're in a great position here, cash wise, and this project certainly will need more cash because there's a lot of drilling to come.
Great. And maybe finally, we had a couple of questions come in on the political side. Obviously, Mexico's been kind of in the news. Can you give us a bit of an update on your thoughts on the current community and relations and political situation in Mexico and President Sheinbaum's even recent announcements with Plan Mexico?
Yeah, so a couple different questions there in terms of local relations. We've got a 24-year agreement for exploration and exploitation mining. We've been operating there for 5 years, so got great relations with the local stakeholders there. We're not in. The other good thing about the project is we're not sitting in the middle of a populated area or village or anything like that. So it makes it much more straightforward with regards to developing the relationships. And as I said, we've been operating there for 5 years now. So great relationships and a long-term deal in place. We're all really good. In terms of Mexico, politically, regarding mining, there's been some very positive developments in terms of the president speaking about the need to actually have open pits, because that was a big talk last year, was banning open pit mining. And there's a recognition that, hey, you need open pit mining, especially for these critical minerals. You're going to need it. And even statements from the president saying things as vital and simple as gravel and limestone for cement are open pits. So you don't want to be banning that. And if you want to develop their lithium resources, they're going to need open pit, and critical metals like copper You're going to need that. So, positive statements there, and very optimistic about the way things are heading.
Great. Well, I think that's all the questions we have now, but maybe before we wrap things up, kind of a closer, maybe you could give us a final pitch on some key catalysts investors should be watching for from the company.
Yeah, we're currently drilling, and so we've got probably half a dozen more holes to finish up this 20,000 meter program. That's yet to drill, and with 2 rigs, and we've got at least about 10 holes in the process of being sampled or sent to lab or in the lab. So there's going to be quite a bit of drill news coming out here over the next 6 to 8 weeks, let's say. And then we'll be looking at all that data and deciding on the maiden resource. Regardless, we'll be coming right back with starting the next program and expanding on what we have, because we're certainly not going to have found the limits by any stretch of the imagination at the end of this 20,000 meter program, which is really great news for us.
Great. All right. Well, I would like to thank Jim McDonald from Kootenay Silver for taking the time to host this webinar today with Red Cloud. And thank you, everyone on the line, for tuning in with us today. Red Cloud will be back next Tuesday when our webinar series continues with Galleon Gold presenting Tuesday, January 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great rest of your day.